was a woman, and she was strolling along the beach in California, and as she's strolling along the beach, shuffling with her feet, she hit a bottle. So she stooped down and she picked up the bottle, and as she picked it up, she began to remove the cork in it, and immediately a genie came out of the bottle and said to her, "Master, I have been a prisoner in this bottle for 1,000 years, and now you have set me free. For that, I will grant you one wish." The woman thought for a moment and then said, "I always wanted to go to Hawaii, but I'm afraid to fly and I get sick on the ship. Could you build a highway from California to Hawaii?" "Master, that is difficult wish to fulfill. Can you think of something that is more practical?" The woman thought for a moment and said, "Could you tell me why men are the way they are?" The genie thought for a moment before replying, Would that be a 2-lane tour?" I can reverse that. Women be too for men, men for women. Well, that's my introduction to this second reflection I want to share with you. And in the first one, I think, if I could sum it up, you heard me say that the relationship of God with us in creation is that spark, is that love, that is the reality of our lives, and is a reality that exists in us, that which we discover. But now I want to talk about love as life in relationship to each other. And again, Pat and I were just commenting earlier, I think the angel of the Lord must have come to both of our dreams and planted seeds for what we should say in terms of the scripture, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Paul talks about. But I want to tell you about what I have encountered in Rome, a wonderful lady that I had been pastoring to. She came to Rome and came to St. Paul's. She was I believe she was a Lutheran, I'm not sure. She wasn't an Episcopalian. But after she had searched a number of churches, because we were English speaking, she came. Her husband worked in the embassy, and she, every Sunday that she came, I could see her. She was very attentive to things I was saying, to the point that literally she came one Sunday and with a pad, and she began writing things down. And then the most lovely thing was that I'm getting emails, and she's asking me different questions. That led into different times, with some difficult teachings in the scripture, some difficult reflections. She made an appointment, she came to see me. Well, we went through a number of years, and she went through a number of trials. Trials of relationship with her 3 children, trials of relationship to her husband, all of whom she loved. But this is what she wrote, and this was right before she left St. Paul's. Part of the letter was thanking me and the parish church for the kind of love and acceptance that we had given her, and that the church she was in, she claimed, she didn't feel the same thing she felt in the Episcopal Church. I told her not to tell the pastor where she had gone, although I think she made me Episcopalian today. But this is what she wrote. She said, "Life is so good with God in the center, and I have learned that at St. Paul's. Now problems turn into solutions, fears turn into hope, anger turns to love. I'm free in God, and it's the best place to be. I've learned to take risks and face challenges. Thank you, Father Michael. I take no credit for any of this. To God be all the glory. He never let go. He took me from a bitter, unhappy, depressed. Time and gave me the wings of eagles, soaring to heights I never dreamed possible. He's given me his words to share with others. He's restored my family and my relationships and has filled me with his love each day. Well, I've kept that obviously in thinking about the theme of love as life in relationship to each other. Obviously, this woman discovered God in herself. She discovered God in her family. She discovered God in the travels and difficulties she had. And she really did, because what she explained to me is that because her husband worked in embassies, she never really was settled down anyway. She'd be 5 years here, 5 years there, 5 years in another place. And community was something that just when she thought she had a handle on feeling she was part of the community, then she was over the part of the community. The testimony is wonderful, and I want to read it to you in many respects. And because it really illustrates what it means to have love in such a profound way that it overflows into all of life, and it overflows into all of relationships. God can do that. Now, she's a theologian because she said that God can do that. I did not do that. As loving as we were at St. Paul's, we didn't do that. But God did that through us. The same was true with the refugees. We had refugees, as you know, most of them Muslim. It was a time after the Iraq War, during the Iraq War, when we entered Iraq, and Rome was flooded. We had nearly 200 refugees every day. They came from Iran, they came from Iraq, they came from Africa. And as I was encouraging people in my congregation and others in the ecumenical community to build this refugee center, I emphasized that it was a place of refuge. Now you're going to find this strange, but I said to them, and because it's a place of refuge, and it's God's refuge, no Bibles and no Quran. The way in which these people, some of Christian were a minority, and the majority Islam, were going to meet God was through each one of you, I told them. What they saw in you, they will make the connection. There's something larger going on. Or they'll ask the question, why are you doing this for us? I had been asked that question many times. The Muslims would say to me, Baba, which was Father. The Imams are Baba. And believe it or not, people were astounded, but as time went on, the Christians would call me Father Michael, and the Muslims would speak up and call me Baba, which was also Father. But I had some of the refugees who asked me, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we providing food every day? Why are we working so hard to provide clothing? Why were we giving out raises for them to shave? All these kids, basically, they were kids. These went from 14 to 18, 20, 21. They were all young, mostly men. Because if any of the women came, the men would not let them come to the refugee center. And they literally stayed in the parks. We tried to change that, but that was hard. But it was loving them and showing them God by avoiding what would have been a flashpoint if there was any fightings that the Quran was true and the Bible is not. No, the Bible is true and the Quran is not. No, Jesus is the only Son of God. No, Muhammad is the... I said, God will not want us to do that. Jesus said, feed my lamb, feed my sheep, my sheep. He did not say, clop them over the head with doctrine. So I want you to clop them over the head with love and show them that. Well, one of the most poignant times was one night we closed the refugee center. And it was about 5 o'clock. Now, I started during the Full Refugee Center at the same time that the priest, and I don't know why I'm blocking his name, Father Francesco who was a Jesuit. He was a new guy in town, I was a new guy in town. I had convinced the parish to open up the entire crypt and to make this refugee center. Part of it, the semblance of it was there, and those courageous people, even, now imagine how scary that would be. We had Muslims from Iraq, not understanding much about Islam. We had some very strict Muslims, although I used to say to my people, believe me, the fundamentalists are not going to come to the church because the cross is there. They won't come in the door. The moderate Muslims, they will come. Not because they don't care about religion, but they will come because they will see that God is there. We are helping them. So even with the imams in the city, we had this. Father Francesco's place was a place where they ate and where they could find places to sleep. Joe Lafuma Center was a day center. We opened at 8 o'clock in the morning, which means they came from the gardens. They had to wash up. We literally, when we reconstructed the center, my bishop said, you know, Michael, I think this is the only Christian church I know that has foot baths for Muslims in their bathrooms. Because the Muslims had to wash their feet. And I said to him, Bishop, yes, well, it's not so much from that. You don't want to be down there when they don't wash their feet. It's very pungent. But we had these two centers going. Mine closed at 5 o'clock. We arranged for Father Francesco. They go down Via Nazionale with their knapsacks, bags, some of them carried, and they would go down there and eat. Maybe a quarter of them would be able to go to a place to sleep inside, and the other quarter would go back out into places where they could find a sleep on the bridges, in the park, or something like that. One little boy, he was, I learned, 14 years old. The traffickers who brought these kids from Iraq into Italy brought them because Rome was one of the places that they could be processed for asylum. But many of the traffickers brought these kids there after their parents might have paid them $2,000 or $3,000 and would say to them, bring my son to Germany or France. Italy didn't have a great reputation for processing. The smugglers would just drop these kids off, and they would, without realizing that they weren't in Paris. They were in Rome. Well, one little boy had come. Everyone left. I was sitting in the church garden. By that time, I was getting a little bit older, so I was a little tired. I was sitting in a bench in the garden, and this little boy walks through. He was a small boy with his knapsack. And he comes walking toward me. And as he started walking toward me, he just broke down and wept. Cried so bitterly. I never experienced it. And he was holding on to me and crying and crying. And of course I couldn't speak Arabic. So Abdullah, who I had hired to be my translator, by the grace of God, he just came upstairs, and I said to him, Tuana, what is he saying? What is the problem? So Tuana was talking to him, and as he's through the tears, and he's letting go of me, looking at Tuana, and he had said to Tuana that he was afraid because he had nowhere to go. He didn't know where to go with the other boys. He didn't understand that there was a place where he could go. The 14-year-olds, or the 11-year-olds, or 12-year-olds who were mixed in with the 1820s, came in truckloads. Those Father Francesco and the Roman Catholic Church took care of. We arranged so that no young boy would stay there. That night, because I cried. I had cried many nights because I went up to a palazzo. I lived in this 13-room, 12-room palazzo right next to the church. I had a beautiful bed. I had rooms I hadn't saw during the week. And so I invited people up. And I cried because I was sleeping in bed and they were sleeping on the streets. But the thing that struck me about One, he was able to come to me, like the prodigal son, if you will, to his Baba, and to be able to cry, but then to be assured that he was loved, that he was going to be loved enough for him to say, no, you have a place. We have a place for you to go. An example of love is life in relationship to each other, and one in which years after that there was a painter that came, an artist, and the director of the center told me about this guy and said, you know, he was an artist in Iraq, and he's looking at your big walls, these big blank walls, and he wants to know, can you paint some of the pictures of Iraq and some of the towns in Iraq so the boys would at least feel some familiarity. And so I had to raise some money to do this for paints and all. And he painted a picture. And I was away out on a retreat during the time. In fact, it was part of my sabbatical. When I came back, the shepherd that was in the field with, at that time he had all white lambs. I told me I'd make one black. Didn't have to say white. They weren't all pure lambs. But guess who was the shepherd? He had taken a picture of me, my secretary gave a picture, and he painted my face in Kurdish clothing. So I had on the turban, I had on these big pants. I also told him to make it a little bit smaller. And he painted me in that. And Nasri, who was a Palestinian, he was retired. He acted as one of my directors for the center. He told me that the boy had seen that I was the Baba, father, and that I was a shepherd like the imams were the shepherd. And I said to Nasri, says, Nasri, but you know, do they understand that we as shepherds, we're not ourselves. We're pointing to somebody else who's a shepherd, who's Jesus. You know? And he said that in Islam, they have the same concept. That the imams are shepherds, but God is the shepherd. Now for us, good shepherd is Jesus. He's the one. No bishop, no priest points to themselves as like the shepherd. We're not. They're simply a symbol, a sign of the great shepherd. The testimony, that I'm giving you in this Bible, Joey's giving you a testimony, just perfectly illustrates, what it means to have love overflowing in your life that does touch and transform and transfigure people. That love is not of ourselves. It's a love that's divine. It's a love that's of God. It's a love that beyond our human expressions of love, people feel. And when we are really living the gospel, people don't look at us and say, oh, isn't she lovely? Isn't he lovely? What we want to happen is that they say, there is the love of God. There is the Word of God. There is the divine in our midst. It's being radiated through